He sits in silence, not because he wants to, but because there's nothing left to say. The room is dim. A faint beam of light slips through the cracked window. Dust floats like lost time. Outside, a dog barks once, then nothing. Inside, the only sound is the steady tick of a clock, not urgent, not slow, just there. No music, no voices, no notifications, just him. And a growing awareness that he doesn't recognize himself anymore, not fully. He didn't fight with anyone today, didn't break down, didn't scream, didn't even cry, but something left him, quietly, almost politely, and he didn't ask it to stay. This is not exhaustion, this is erosion. It's what happens when you carry things that don't belong to you, when you move through your days like a ghost wearing your own skin, when the world claps for your performance, but you know the applause isn't for you. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful, it's heavy, unspoken, familiar. Like the moment right after someone asks you, "Are you okay?" And you almost say the truth, but don't, because even you aren't sure what the truth is anymore. So you nod, you smile, and you keep going. You answer messages you didn't want to read. Say yes to things that drain you. Stay in places that make you small. Delay what your soul has been asking you to change for years, not because you're weak, but because it became normal. And when pain becomes routine, peace starts to feel unfamiliar. Suspicious, foreign, until one night, the silence gets loud enough to hear, and something inside whispers, "You are disappearing." Not in a dramatic way, not in a way others would notice, but slowly, silently, like a candle burning in an empty room. No wind, no flame, just wax giving in to time. That's the kind of loss no one talks about. The loss of presence, of clarity, of peace. But peace doesn't vanish in one big moment. It's stolen by habits that pretend to be harmless, by patterns that look like survival but taste like self-betrayal, by words you never said, decisions you never made, versions of you that never lived. And now you find yourself staring at a screen late at night, looking for something. Maybe this, maybe truth without noise. Maybe a voice that doesn't scream, but cuts deeper than any shout. So hear this, not as advice, but as a mirror. There are 17 habits that are stealing your peace. Not loudly, not violently, but like a slow leak in a house you stop maintaining. You don't notice it until everything feels damp. This isn't a motivational video, it's a confrontation, but a quiet one. No judgment, no shouting, no fireworks. Just one voice, saying what you already knew, but were too tired to face. If you have the courage to stay until the end, maybe, just maybe, you'll start to remember who you were before the noise. Not the version that smiles for others, but the one that sits in silence and doesn't need to explain it. He didn't always live like this. There was a time when mornings felt like invitations. Now, they feel like deadlines. He wakes up not because he's rested, but because he's late. Not late for a meeting or an appointment, late for himself. There's a difference. You can be early for everything the world demands and still be years behind in your soul. You rush through your morning. You reach for your phone before you reach for your breath. Notifications replace reflection. Scrolling replaces silence. You've been conditioned to believe that being informed is the same as being alive. It's not. The noise you consume becomes the noise you carry, and the heaviest burdens are the ones no one sees. He drinks his coffee, fast, not for taste, for function. It doesn't wake him up, it just keeps him going. The difference is subtle, but deadly. You don't need to collapse to be broken. You can function perfectly and still be lost. You smile at people. You laugh at the right moments. You nod when someone tells a story you've heard before. But inside, something's flickering, fading. And when you finally get a moment alone, you don't rest. You distract, because silence isn't peaceful yet. It's loud, unbearable, confrontational. It asks questions you've avoided for years. Why are you still here? Who told you this was enough? What are you really afraid of losing? He knows the answers. He just doesn't want to say them out loud, because truth has consequences, and peace demands a price. It always has. You don't get to feel light while carrying what's been killing you, not at the same time. You'll have to let go of something or someone, maybe both. And that's where resistance begins. We say we want peace, but we cling to habits that ruin it. Not because we love the pain, but because it's familiar. There's a kind of security in dysfunction when it's all you've known. You build routines around your wounds. You call them just the way I am, but they're not. They're the way you became to survive. And now they're the reason you can't breathe. You say you're tired, but it's not your body that's exhausted. It's your spirit. Your peace wasn't stolen in one grand act. It was chipped away by little things. The habits you defend, the people you tolerate, the roles you keep playing, even when they no longer fit, especially then. And you know this. You feel it every time you're alone, in the moments when there's no audience, no performance, just you and the cost of pretending. Peace doesn't begin with more. It begins with less noise, less explaining, less availability. It begins in silence, but not the kind you use to hide, the kind you use to hear, the kind that strips you bare. He used to fill every quiet space with movement. Now he listens, not for answers, but for honesty. There's a voice inside. It doesn't shout. It never did. It whispers, one word at a time, simple, unapologetic. Enough. Enough of reacting. Enough of trying. Enough of becoming what others need while forgetting what you are. This voice doesn't want applause. It wants presence. And if you stay with it long enough, you start to remember. The weight of your peace is not in what you carry, but in what you release. You were never taught how to rest without guilt, only how to perform. So when the world goes quiet, you panic. Not because something's wrong, but because you no longer know how to exist without being needed. And that's dangerous, because the need to be useful will make you tolerate anything, as long as it gives you a role, even if that role is slowly erasing you, even if the applause comes with chains. That's what nobody tells you, that some forms of validation are cages with gold paint. You think you're free because you're admired. But admiration is cheap when it's based on sacrifice no one sees. You were never meant to be a monument for other people's comfort. You were meant to breathe, fully, silently, without permission. But breathing takes space, and space requires boundaries, and boundaries require courage, not the kind of courage that wins medals. The kind that says no without explanation, that leaves without drama, that stays quiet when others expect performance. You don't owe the world your peace. You owe it to yourself. But peace isn't handed to you. It's reclaimed. In the moments when you choose stillness over speed, silence over noise, truth over performance. And that choice, it's not dramatic. It's subtle, daily, invisible to everyone but you. Like saying no to a message that drains you, like waking up before the demands arrive. Like sitting in your own company and not flinching. That's where it begins, not with fireworks, with refusal. Refusal to keep feeding the habits that stole your clarity. Refusal to keep negotiating with patterns that led you here. Because you know. You've always known. Peace isn't a place you visit, it's a standard you enforce. But enforcing it requires loss. The loss of chaos you secretly depended on. The loss of distractions you used as identity. The loss of being the person who always says yes. That's not easy, but it's necessary. He learned that the hard way, by burning out, not in flames, but in silence. No one noticed. He kept smiling, kept replying, kept showing up, until the version of him that felt alive was only a memory. And that's when he realized, if he didn't walk away from what was killing him quietly, it would bury him quietly too. You won't always get a warning. Sometimes the collapse is internal. No ambulance, no siren, just emptiness. Don't wait for that. Don't wait for rock bottom to give you permission to change. You can walk now. You can choose peace before pain forces you to. But you'll have to let go of what feels safe, of what feels normal, of what makes you feel seen but not sustained. Some things only look like love. Some habits only feel like comfort because they're familiar. But familiarity isn't peace, and recognition isn't worth your soul. So let them wonder why you're quiet. Let them question why you changed. You don't need to explain your healing. Silence is not absence, it's alignment. It's returning to the truth that was never loud to begin with, the truth that whispers, you were not made for noise, you were made for depth. And depth begins where distraction ends. There are moments when you don't even realize what's draining you, not because you're blind, but because you've adapted too well. You've learned to call survival a routine, to label discomfort as just part of life, to normalize the weight on your chest each morning. But what you tolerate teaches you what to accept. And little by little, that tolerance becomes identity. You stop questioning, you stop resisting, and eventually you stop feeling. You move through your day like a shadow, efficient, present, functional, but detached from your own breath, from your own needs, from your own essence. People admire your strength. They see your discipline, your consistency, your reliability, but they don't see the internal bleeding. Because you've mastered the art of silence, not the empowering kind, the kind that swallows your truth, that hides your fear beneath productivity, that confuses peace with numbness. But peace isn't numb, it's alive, it breathes. And if it doesn't breathe, it's not peace, it's exhaustion in disguise. That's why this work can't be external. It's not about decluttering your schedule. It's about decluttering your soul, asking questions you avoid, facing truths you silence, choosing to stand still even when everything urges you to move. Stillness is not stagnation. It's resistance. It's where your clarity sharpens. It's where illusions fall apart. It's where your real strength is born. Because strength isn't noise, it's restraint. The ability to hold yourself when everything shakes. The courage to let go when comfort turns into poison. He sat in that stillness for days. No answers, no clarity, just the slow unraveling of everything he thought he needed. He missed the chaos at first, the urgency, the distractions. They had become his rhythm, but beneath them, he discovered something rare, a voice, not external, not motivational, just quiet, present, unimpressed. It didn't ask him to improve, it asked him to stop pretending. That voice was truth, the kind that doesn't beg for your attention, the kind that's always been there, waiting for the noise to stop, waiting for you to be alone long enough to hear it. That's where peace lives, not in perfection, but in honesty. And honesty requires discomfort. The discomfort of saying, I don't want this anymore. The courage to whisper, this is not who I am. And the discipline to act like it, even when no one claps. Even when no one understands, especially then, because peace isn't a performance, it's a practice, one that happens when the world is asleep, when the screens are off, when your body finally stops moving, and all that's left is you, raw, real, silent. That's the doorway, not the goal, the beginning, because cutting what no longer belongs to you, that's the real work. And you do it in silence. No announcement, no declaration, just a slow, steady refusal to carry what isn't yours. One habit at a time, one decision at a time, one breath at a time. Peace doesn't disappear, it gets buried, under noise, under speed, under everything you thought was necessary just to survive. You didn't lose your peace, you lost access to it. And the reason? Habits. Not the obvious ones. Not the ones people post about on New Year's resolutions. The invisible ones. The ones that look small, even harmless. But they aren't. They're slow leaks, micro-fractures, tiny compromises that, over time, cost you everything real. You don't feel the damage at first. You feel busy, distracted, mildly overwhelmed. But you keep going. Because that's what you were taught. Keep going, push through, stay productive, even if you're spiritually suffocating, even if your inner world is collapsing, because stopping feels like failure and silence feels like weakness. But what if silence is the beginning? Not of weakness, but of power, real power, the kind you don't need to prove, the kind you don't need to post about, the kind that doesn't shout for attention, because it's already rooted in clarity. That's what this is about. Not motivation, not inspiration, just truth, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't care if you're ready to hear it. It waits until your defenses fall, until your distractions grow too loud to ignore, until one night you sit alone and realize that something has to give, not because you read a quote, but because your soul whispered, "I can't live like this anymore." That whisper is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough, but only if you listen, only if you stop just long enough to see the truth. And the truth is this: you are being drained by habits you didn't even choose, by routines that don't serve you, by patterns passed down to you or absorbed unconsciously simply because everyone else was doing them. But just because it's common doesn't mean it's natural. Just because it's accepted doesn't mean it's acceptable. And now it's your turn to decide, to see, to cut. 17 habits, 17 silent thieves. You won't find them screaming in your face. You'll find them in the quiet moments, in the restless nights, in the rushed mornings, in the artificial yes, in the neglected no. They are not monsters, they're shadows, subtle, familiar, disguised as normal, but they take your energy, your attention, your clarity, your breath, one unnoticed repetition at a time, until you don't recognize yourself anymore, until you feel heavy but can't name why, until the days blur together and your inner voice fades beneath a script you never wrote. That ends now, but not with noise, not with drama, not with a grand declaration, with awareness and action, the kind of action no one sees, the kind that happens when you close the door, when you turn off the phone, when you decide quietly that enough is enough. This won't be loud, it will be surgical, precise, 17 cuts, 17 choices, 17 silent revolutions. If you make them, all of them, you won't need applause. You'll feel it in your breath, in your sleep, in your stillness. You'll know something is returning, not something new, something ancient, your peace, the one you buried to survive, the one you now must dig up in silence. They won't announce themselves. These habits, they won't knock on your door or scream in your face. They slip in, uninvited, unnoticed, and that's what makes them dangerous, because you don't fight what you can't see, and you don't heal what you normalize. You call them routine, you call them necessary, you even call them part of your identity, but they're not you. They're survival codes you adopted in moments of fear, moments of doubt, moments when you believed peace was a luxury, not a right. So you settled, not all at once, but one compromise at a time. A late night you didn't need, a conversation you knew would drain you, a message you responded to out of guilt, not desire, a promise to yourself broken in silence. And each time, something small was taken from you, not your success, not your image, but your core, your sense of alignment, and slowly you adjusted. You got used to the static, to the background noise in your chest, to the low hum of unease that followed you everywhere. You stopped asking why. You stopped expecting clarity. You just coped. But coping is not the same as living. It's endurance without direction. It's movement without meaning. And peace doesn't grow in chaos. It grows in choice. You can't control everything that reaches for your attention, but you can choose what you respond to, what you tolerate, what you invite into your inner space. That's what these 17 habits do. They bypass your conscious filters. They infiltrate the places where you stopped paying attention. They become background scripts, running, looping, repeating. Not because you want them, but because you forgot to tell them to leave. So now, this is your moment, not to react, to see, to observe without flinching, to sit still long enough to witness the patterns you've outgrown. Not with shame, with clarity, because shame paralyzes, but clarity liberates. You are not broken, you are buried, beneath layers of shoulds and musts and have-tos, beneath urgency that isn't yours, beneath expectations you never agreed to. And if you want your peace back, you'll have to start digging, not outside, inside, through silence, through honesty, through the brutal but necessary practice of cutting what doesn't belong to you, even if you built your identity around it. This won't be easy. There will be grief, because even harmful habits feel like home when they've been with you long enough. But you've outgrown the house built on noise. You've outgrown the version of yourself who needed approval to feel safe. Now, you need something deeper, stillness that doesn't suffocate, discipline that doesn't destroy, presence that doesn't perform. And the way there? 17 doors, each one a habit, each one a thief in disguise. You don't need to rush, you just need to see. And once you see, you can't unsee. You can't pretend blindness when your soul has already opened its eyes. So breathe, slowly. This isn't a sprint, it's an exorcism, one habit at a time, pulled out by the root, in silence. No audience, no likes, no validation, just you. And the choice to reclaim what was always yours. The hardest part isn't cutting. It's admitting something needs to be cut, because naming the habit makes it real. And once it's real, you can't hide behind it. You can't call it stress when it's actually avoidance. You can't call it love when it's really dependence. You can't call it discipline when it's just distraction in disguise. That's the work, not perfection, but perception. Learning to see your life without the filters you've used for comfort. Because comfort can lie, especially when it comes wrapped in routine. You say, "I've always done it this way," as if repetition justifies damage, but it doesn't. All it means is that the wound became familiar, and that's what kills your peace. Not the obvious chaos, but the subtle betrayals, the self-abandonment masked as kindness, the forced smiles you wear like armor, the way you rush to fix others but never sit long enough to fix yourself. You were trained to prioritize what's loud, to answer what demands you, to respond instantly, urgently, without pause. But silence has no urgency. It doesn't chase you, it waits. And when you finally turn toward it, you'll notice something strange. It doesn't hurt you, it reveals you. All along, the chaos wasn't protecting you. It was keeping you too busy to notice you were lost. You kept running because stillness was too honest. But honesty is what heals, not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, like light, returning to a room that's been dark for too long. This is what we do now. We turn on the light. We look at the habits. We name them one by one, not to judge, but to reclaim. Every thief, every leak, every crack, it's all part of the map back to yourself. But maps don't walk for you. You still have to move, you still have to decide. And some of those decisions will hurt, because they mean choosing peace over familiarity, stillness over stimulation, truth over comfort. But what else are you waiting for? Another collapse, another quiet panic in the middle of the night, another relationship that teaches you what you already knew, that being needed is not the same as being known. You've had enough lessons. Now it's time for release. Not public, not loud, not even shared, just silent and steady. One by one, 17 decisions, 17 small exits from noise. Each habit you let go of is not a loss. It's a return to breath, to center, to self. The world won't celebrate this, but your body will, your nervous system will, your mornings will. That's the real reward, not more things, but more space. Space to be, to breathe, to exist without apologizing. You don't need another routine. You need release. You don't need a list of goals. You need a list of goodbyes. And that's what we begin now. Not with fear, with quiet conviction. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering someone true, the you that doesn't explain his boundaries. The you that doesn't beg for attention, the you that doesn't sacrifice peace for permission. He's still there, beneath the layers, waiting. And with each habit you cut, he steps forward, not louder, but clearer. 1, sleeping with your phone on your face, not because you're tired, but because you're avoiding something. You say it helps you fall asleep, but what it really does is drown out the silence. The kind of silence that would make you confront your own emptiness. The blue light numbs, but it also erodes. Every night you scroll through meaningless noise is a night you don't return to yourself. You weren't designed to sleep with chaos as your lullaby. You were meant to rest with nothing pulling you away from presence. Start there. Leave the phone. Return to your breath. 2, explaining yourself to people who aren't listening. You're not communicating. You're performing. Begging for understanding in places that never offered it. You rewrite your sentences. You soften your truth. You overextend, and still they don't see you because they were never trying to. Peace begins when you stop proving yourself to people who benefit from your confusion. Speak once, then observe. 3, keeping conversations that always leave you drained. They don't ask how you are. They just wait for their turn to speak, and when they speak, it's all take. No give, no reflection, no depth. You call it friendship, but your body calls it fatigue. You've mistaken proximity for connection, and connection for obligation. Let that go. You don't have to announce it, just stop watering dead ground. 4, expecting from people who never gave you anything real. They show up with inconsistency, with silence when it matters, with absence that leaves you questioning your worth. But still, you wait. You convince yourself it'll change. It won't. You're not hoping. You're delaying grief. Let go of the illusion. See them for who they've shown themselves to be, not who you imagined. Your peace is not found in their potential. It's found in your release. 5, working all day without pausing to breathe. You equate exhaustion with value, busyness with importance. But the truth, you're hiding. Behind tasks, behind urgency, behind a calendar full of things that validate your productivity but starve your soul. Rest is not a reward, it's a responsibility. A body that never pauses becomes a mind that forgets how to feel. You don't need a vacation. You need permission from yourself to stop. 6, needing constant validation just to feel real. You post, then check. You share, then wait. You measure your existence by reaction. But real peace, it doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't ask for likes. It stands, even in darkness. It whispers, I know who I am, even when no one else is looking. Stop outsourcing your worth. It was never meant to be rented. 7, responding to messages without your soul attached. The small talk, the fake smiles, the obligatory replies. They chip at your essence. You type, I'm good, when you're not. You say no problem when you're collapsing inside. That's not presence. That's absence in disguise. You don't owe access to everyone. You owe truth to yourself. And sometimes truth is silence. 8, waking up every day already behind, not just on time, on life. You feel late before you even rise, because your mornings aren't yours. They belong to your phone, your obligations, your guilt. You react instead of create. That's not living, that's surviving on autopilot. Reclaim your first breath of the day, before the world arrives, before your mind is hijacked. That's where peace waits. 9, comparing yourself to everyone. You scroll, you see their highlight reels, you forget your scars, and in that moment you shrink, not because they're better, but because you've abandoned your own path while staring at theirs. Comparison isn't admiration, it's self-rejection. The more you watch, the less you create. The more you compare, the more you erase yourself. Their success doesn't mean your failure. Their light doesn't dim yours. Return to your lane. Water your own roots. Let their journey go. 10. Avoiding hard decisions that are already overdue. You know the truth, but you delay. You keep asking for signs when you already have clarity. Fear pretends to be logic. It tells you to wait, to think more, to hope things will magically change. But avoidance is just anxiety in disguise, and while you stall, your peace rots. You don't need more time, you need courage. The decision isn't what breaks you, the delay does. 11. Staying in places where your soul stopped growing. Comfort is not peace, it's just a pause in discomfort. And sometimes you confuse stillness with safety. But deep down, you know, you're shrinking, you've stopped expanding, stopped dreaming, stopped evolving, and you call it stability, but it's stagnation. And stagnation kills slowly, 1 month, 1 year, one numb breath at a time. You don't have to burn bridges, but you must stop building on ground that no longer feeds you. 12. Repeating habits that have already proven they don't work. You've tried it, you've watched it fail, you've felt the consequences, and still you say, just one more time. That's not persistence, that's denial. A loop is not a lesson, it's a trap. And the longer you stay in it, the more it feels like identity. Break the loop, not tomorrow, not eventually, now. Change isn't loud, it's the quiet refusal to keep touching the same wound. 13. Needing to control everything around you. You schedule every second. You anticipate every outcome. You build walls made of plans. But what you're really doing is hiding, because uncertainty terrifies you. So you try to outthink life, to manage every detail, to never be caught off guard. But the truth? You're already exhausted. Control is not safety, it's obsession. And obsession is a form of fear. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom, because no matter how tight your grip, life still moves, and peace only lives in what you can't dominate, but choose to trust. 14. Being available to everyone, all the time. You answer every call, reply to every message, say yes before you even think, because you don't want to disappoint, because you confuse being needed with being loved. But availability without boundaries is self-abandonment. You teach people how to treat you, and when you teach them that you're always there, they stop asking if you're okay. They stop wondering what you need, because your silence became permission. And now, you're drowning in obligations you never agreed to. Peace doesn't demand isolation, but it does require sacred space. You can't heal in a place where you're constantly being pulled away from yourself. Withdraw, not to punish, but to protect. 15. Pretending everything is fine when it's not. You smile, you laugh, you post quotes about strength, but inside you ache, and you hide it. Not because you're fake, but because you think no one would understand. You've become fluent in emotional camouflage, and every day you wear that mask, the real you fades. Peace isn't about having no problems. It's about not lying to yourself about them. You don't have to bleed in public, but you do need to feel in private. Let yourself break without shame. That's where healing begins, not in hiding. In honesty. 16. Eating what drains your energy and calling it reward. You crave the sugar, the fat, the heavy foods that numb your senses. You say, I deserve this. But what you're really saying is, I don't want to feel right now. Because food can be silence too, the wrong kind, the kind that makes you forget how tired your body is. You weren't designed to digest pain, but that's what you're doing. Every time you choose pleasure that punishes, your body is your foundation. And if your peace doesn't reach your gut, it will never reach your mind. Choose fuel over escape, even if no one sees it, especially then. 17. Talking about people instead of facing your own wounds. Gossip is noise. a way to avoid your own mirror. When you dissect someone else's life, you don't have to sit with your own. That's why it feels powerful, but leaves you empty. Because it's not power, it's projection. Every time you criticize what you don't understand, you confess something. A fear, a lack, a story you haven't healed. The Stoics didn't react, they reflected. They didn't tear down others to feel tall. They stood silently, with themselves, let others speak in circles. You don't need to join, you need to observe, in stillness, and choose a different response. None at all. The room hasn't changed. Same window, same flicker of light bleeding through the crack, same clock ticking in the background. But something is different. He's still sitting there, motionless, still breathing the same air, surrounded by the same objects, yet inside, something no longer fits. Not the noise, not the urgency, not the roles. Something shifted, and it didn't shout when it happened. It whispered, like an echo finding its way back home. That's what truth feels like when it returns. Not a roar, a realization. After all the habits, after all the false starts and delayed decisions, after all the empty conversations and fractured nights, what's left is clarity. Not the kind that solves everything, the kind that finally removes what never belonged. He looks around and notices how still the space is, but it doesn't scare him anymore. Silence has become a companion, not a threat. Stillness now feels like power, because he's no longer waiting for someone to fix it, to call, to apologize, to validate. He's no longer filling every breath with reasons to stay where he no longer grows. There's no drama in his decision, no grand statement, just release. That's the quiet gift of cutting the habits that stole from you silently. You don't just gain time, you regain presence, focus, authority over what enters your mind, over what touches your heart, over what you give your life to. Moment by moment, the world hasn't slowed down. It's still loud, still pulling, still burning with urgency. But something inside him now remains untouched. And that untouched part is where peace lives. Peace isn't found, it's protected, built one no at a time. One truth at a time, one silent act of refusal after another. It doesn't come wrapped in applause. It arrives when you've had enough. When your nervous system collapses under the weight of pretending. When your identity no longer fits the roles you've accepted. When your body aches in places no one can see, from wounds no one was supposed to notice. That's when peace calls, not with promises, but with questions. Are you done? Are you tired enough to stop? Are you brave enough to stay? Not stay where you are, stay with yourself, in the discomfort, in the breathless silence, in the unfamiliar calm that feels more like emptiness at first. Because that emptiness, it's space, space for you to return, not as a version the world approves of, but as the version you forgot existed, the one who doesn't explain his stillness, who doesn't rush to fill awkward gaps with words, who doesn't need to be loud to be known. That version of you doesn't crave noise. He listens to life like a monk listens to rain. He notices the patterns. He sees through the distraction. He walks slower, but with purpose. And he doesn't owe anyone a single explanation. Because peace doesn't advertise. It just is. The man still doesn't move. Not because he's paralyzed, but because for the first time in a long time, there's no urge to escape, no impulse to reach for his phone, no anxiety pushing him to be somewhere else, to be someone else. He's here, fully. That used to terrify him. The weight of being present, the responsibility of it, the rawness, because when you're fully here, you can't pretend. You can't hide behind what you're doing. You are reduced to who you are. And that can feel like a collapse at first. But then, something remarkable happens. You realize that most of your exhaustion didn't come from doing too much. It came from being too far from yourself. from living 100 steps ahead, from reacting instead of responding, from existing in conversations where your soul had left the room long ago. And now you're done with that. Not with anger, with awareness. Because peace is not passive, it's assertive. It requires confrontation with your comfort, with your patterns, with your willingness to betray yourself just to keep the world calm. The man in the room has nothing left to perform. And in that absence of performance, he finds presence. He doesn't feel lighter because life changed. He feels lighter because he stopped carrying what never belonged to him. He stopped dragging outdated expectations, stopped chasing temporary approval, stopped dressing his anxiety in productivity and calling it purpose. And now, he doesn't need noise. He doesn't need to fill the silence with validation. He lets it breathe. He lets it stretch. Because silence, when honored, expands into clarity. The clarity that tells you what to walk away from without guilt. The clarity that doesn't beg you to be more, but invites you to be less, more honestly. You don't get there by accident. You get there by subtraction, by removing what distorts you, by cutting what confuses you, by refusing to continue being a character in someone else's story. And when you do, you hear something again, not outside, inside, something steady, unshaken, a rhythm beneath the chaos, your own. The part of you that doesn't need to prove anything, the part that doesn't flinch when left alone, the part that doesn't get lost when things slow down. That's peace, not the perfect schedule, not the ideal relationship, not the absence of problems. Peace is the absence of fragmentation. It's when your mind, your words, and your actions finally move in the same direction. When your mornings begin in stillness, not panic. When your boundaries don't need explanation. When your no is sacred, and your yes is chosen. He doesn't rise from the chair just yet. There's no rush, because peace doesn't hurry. It doesn't apologize for being quiet. It doesn't compete with the noise. It simply exists like a mountain, unshaken, grounded, clear. That's who you're becoming now. Not louder, but firmer. Not faster, but truer. He doesn't need a conclusion, just closure. Not the dramatic kind, the kind that arrives when something inside finally exhales. It's not a final decision. It's a final realization that he no longer needs to be in places where his silence isn't respected, that he no longer wants to explain why peace matters more than attention, that his time, his presence, his soul are not for sale. This isn't withdrawal, it's return to a version of himself that doesn't rush to respond, that doesn't chase closure from others who never offered it, that doesn't live in defense. This is where the storm calms, not outside, inside. Because the storm was never out there. It was internal, fueled by expectations that weren't his, habits that hollowed him, patterns that passed as survival, but quietly poisoned his ability to feel. That's what these 17 habits did. They didn't break him all at once. They diluted him, one compromise at a time, until his reflection became unfamiliar, until his voice didn't sound like his own, until his days felt like loops with no meaning, only momentum. But that ends now, without noise, without proof, just quiet defiance. Each habit cut was not a loss, it was a return to clarity, a return to rhythm, a return to the kind of man who doesn't need the world to understand him in order to stay grounded. He just breathes, he just walks, he just lives, without debt to anyone's expectations. And now, the silence in the room isn't empty. It's full of space, full of truth, full of the weightless presence that used to be drowned in urgency. The clock still ticks. But time doesn't feel like a threat anymore. Because he's not chasing it, he's moving with it, aligned. This is the hidden gift of stillness. It reveals everything that noise kept you from seeing, the small ways you left yourself, The subtle ways you betrayed your needs, the habits that seemed harmless until they hollowed you, and when you cut them, you don't just regain focus, you regain your edge, your center, your sense of enough. You wake up earlier, not because you're behind, but because you're present. You speak less, because your peace doesn't negotiate. You stop reaching for validation, because your worth is no longer outsourced. And those around you? Some will notice, some won't, but it doesn't matter because this wasn't for them. It was never about being understood. It was about being aligned. You walk differently now, not with pride, with weight, not with arrogance, with knowing. You walk like someone who has nothing left to prove and everything to protect. And that protection, it begins with silence, not as escape, but as sanctuary. Because silence, when you no longer fear it, becomes sacred. The chair creaks beneath him, not because he moves, but because the silence has weight now, a different kind of weight, not heaviness, substance. Everything around him feels the same, but inside, the entire landscape has shifted. He's not looking for change. He's become the change, and it didn't require a speech or a ritual or some dramatic declaration of a new chapter. It happened quietly, in the decision to stop giving away what was sacred, to stop negotiating with habits that never deserved to stay, to stop filling his life with noise just because silence used to hurt. Now, the silence feels holy. It wraps around him like armor, not to protect from attack, but to protect from dilution. Because that's how peace disappears, not through battles, but through leaks, tiny, constant leaks. One bad conversation, one delayed boundary, one scroll too long through someone else's life, one more excuse to postpone your own. And suddenly, months pass, then years. Then you look in the mirror and realize you're living a life you never truly chose. You're performing someone else's idea of happiness, fulfilling duties you never agreed to, saying yes when your soul was screaming no. But now, there are no screams, just space, stillness, a strange, tender kind of freedom, the kind that isn't loud because it doesn't need to be. That's how you know it's real. It doesn't demand attention. It simply is. He hasn't said a word in hours, because there's nothing left to say. Everything that needed to be released has been. Through awareness, through refusal, through subtraction. And now, he's not lighter because he escaped. He's lighter because he stayed through the unease, stayed through the guilt of saying no, stayed through the tremble of becoming unfamiliar to others, but familiar to himself. That's what most people never tell you. Peace isn't about comfort. It's about consistency. The kind that doesn't waver when misunderstood. The kind that doesn't shrink when questioned. The kind that says, I no longer explain myself because I'm finally listening to myself. He doesn't need reminders anymore. He doesn't need mantras or alarms. He has rhythm now. And rhythm is sacred. It moves without force, guides without noise. That's how his mornings begin now, not with panic, but with posture, feet on the floor, spine straight, no rush, just breath, just presence. And if something tries to enter that doesn't belong, he doesn't fight it, he lets it pass. That's the thing about clarity. It doesn't require resistance, just recognition. Not every invitation needs a reply. Not every noise needs your attention. Not every weight needs to be carried, especially the invisible ones. Now he only carries what aligns, and he carries it quietly, because quiet is no longer empty. It's earned. He doesn't need to be understood. That was the trap all along. Explaining every boundary, justifying every decision, watering down the truth so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable around his peace. But that's over. His peace no longer negotiates. It simply is, not as defiance, but as discipline. He's learned that protecting your energy doesn't require permission, and most people won't understand the choices you make when you start honoring yourself, because they only knew the version of you that bent, that adjusted, that overgave. Now, you walk differently, you say less, you pause longer, and not because you're hiding, but because you're holding something sacred, your center, that place inside that no longer shifts with external noise. It doesn't react to urgency. It doesn't apologize for its silence. It listens, it observes, it decides slowly, clearly, without chaos. This is what cutting the 17 habits gave him. Not ease, but equilibrium. A stillness so honest it repels anything fake. And the fake, it always notices first. People who fed off your instability will sense the shift. They'll test it. They'll question your silence. They'll call it cold, distant, arrogant. Let them. They're naming the discomfort of no longer having access to a version of you that's self-abandoned. You don't owe them warmth that costs you clarity. You don't owe anyone a version of you that breaks so they can stay comfortable. That's not peace. That's performance. And he's done performing. He doesn't even explain anymore, because explanations invite negotiation. And his peace is not for sale, so he sits, not to escape, but to root, to inhabit his own space without guilt, to build a life around what feels aligned, not what looks acceptable. And in this life, mornings begin in stillness, afternoons move with intention, evenings end in silence, not because the day was perfect, but because it was his, fully. Every yes chosen, every no honored, every breath owned. There's a power in that, not the power that dominates, the power that refuses to be dominated by what isn't true. This is the essence of living stoically, not detached, engaged, but not entangled. Prisoned, but not reactive, available, but never at the expense of your own center. That's what the world needs now. Not more noise, more people who can walk through chaos without becoming it. More people who can sit in silence without craving distraction. More people who live not to be seen, but to be whole. He doesn't seek peace anymore. He is peace, and that changes everything. He doesn't speak as he stands. No words are necessary. Because the shift already happened, not in conversation but in conviction. Some changes don't need witnesses, only truth. And his truth no longer waits for approval, it simply aligns. The room remains the same, the window, the still air, the faint ticking of the clock, but everything inside him is rearranged. It's not about a new life, it's about living this one, honestly. He walks slower now. Not out of fatigue, out of reverence. Every step is intentional, every breath measured, every choice filtered through a question. Does this honor my peace? If not, it goes, without debate, without delay, because after everything he's lost, time, clarity, pieces of himself handed out in exchange for acceptance, he finally understands what's non-negotiable. His silence. Not silence as withdrawal, silence as sovereignty. That deep, grounded stillness that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. He carries it like armor, not to keep others out, to keep himself intact. The version of him that once panicked in quiet moments is gone, not because he escaped, but because he stayed long enough for the discomfort to teach him. Now, the silence is home, and everything that tries to enter, urgency, noise, shallow demands, is filtered through a gate of presence. He no longer reacts, he responds. He no longer explains, he embodies. And what once drained him, the need to be liked, to be chosen, to be understood, has no hold now. Because when you return to yourself fully, you realize something. Not everyone is meant to follow you there. Some will leave. Let them. Some will misunderstand. Let them. Some will try to pull you back into the noise, the chaos, the versions of you that bent just to belong. Let them try. Your silence will speak for you. Your boundaries will speak for you. Your breath, slow, grounded, undisturbed, will speak for you. And what it says is simple. I'm not here to be everything for everyone. I'm here to be whole. The journey wasn't easy. There were days filled with doubt, nights heavy with guilt, moments where the temptation to return to the noise was overwhelming, but he didn't. He stayed. He cut what needed cutting. He sat in the ache of transformation, and now he doesn't glow with excitement. He glows with peace, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to be seen, to be felt. It wraps around him like something ancient, something earned. And if someone were to ask what changed, he wouldn't answer, he'd just breathe, because some answers aren't spoken, they're lived. The same room, same walls, same flickering light tracing the edges of the floor. The clock still ticks, steady, indifferent. But the man who sits in the silence is no longer the same. He hasn't spoken in hours, and he doesn't need to, because something deeper than words has taken hold. He no longer measures his day by what he accomplished. He measures it by what he protected, his breath, his rhythm, his peace. For years he thought peace was something to pursue, something out there, on a mountain, in a book, in a better version of himself he hadn't met yet. But now he knows. Peace was never something to find. It was something to remember. It was there before the noise, before the performance, before the habits. He had just forgotten how it feels to walk through a room without bracing for impact, to start a day without needing to be seen, to end a conversation without shrinking to fit. That's what these 17 cuts gave him. Not perfection, but presence, the ability to be where he is, without resistance, to feel what he feels, without defense, to breathe, without guilt. He rises now, not because the silence ends, but because it deepens. Each step forward is softer, but more grounded. There's no need to rush anymore. He's not behind. He's not trying to catch up to some invisible version of success. He's not at war with time. He walks slowly because he knows where he's going. Back to himself. The chair behind him is still. It doesn't mourn his absence, because this isn't the end of something. It's the embodiment of everything he became, everything he remembered. He doesn't look in the mirror expecting to see a stranger. He sees someone who's been there all along, just buried under noise. And when he does speak again, it will be different, fewer words, more weight. Because silence taught him something language couldn't. That clarity doesn't demand expression, it demands embodiment. He will no longer explain his boundaries. He will no longer justify his stillness. He will no longer translate his peace for people addicted to their own noise. Instead, he will live it. And in living it, fully, quietly, unapologetically, he becomes a mirror for others. Not by preaching, by being. A presence, a standard, an invitation, and to those who ask what happened. Why the shift? Why the stillness? He won't offer a paragraph. He'll offer a pause, because the truth is simple. He got tired of bleeding for things that never gave life back. Tired of conversations that drained and connections that hollowed. Tired of proving his worth through availability, through noise, through performance. So he stopped. And in the stopping, something began. A kind of peace that no one can gift and no one can take. A kind of wholeness that doesn't bend for attention. A kind of clarity that doesn't echo. It just exists. You don't need to speak when your life speaks for you. You don't need to prove your alignment. You walk it, you breathe it, you are it. And so the final words are not spoken aloud. They're lived. In your stillness, in your rhythm, in your refusal to be anything less than complete. And if this message found you in a moment of noise, in a night of silent ache, in a breath that felt too heavy to hold, then let it stay, not as noise, as reminder. You're not behind, you're just buried. And now, you're coming back, quietly, steadily, without needing permission. If this spoke to something inside you that doesn't yet have language, honor it with silence, with breath, with a single symbol, a point, a pause, a full stop, not as the end, but as your return.